the surface. Location?
Western Hemisphere. North American continent. It's like a missile complex in central Montana.
Finding a missile silo that we needed, it was a very integral part of the story. Finding a real one in Arizona with a real Titan missile sitting in it, and being able to bring in Matt Leonetti and a remarkable lighting crew to bring this thing to life and to bring our characters into a 21st century setting that was so real and so awesome in its scope. It was a real treat.
How often in life do you get presented with, by the way, I need a missile silo? Oh, that sounds cool. Let's go see where we can find one. For me, production is lots of fun. It's a great adventure. And I really like the adventure. So we found a missile silo. We found it down in Tucson, Arizona. It used to be the real deal. They turned it into a Titan Missile Museum. And we got to go play in that. Now that was lots of fun.
They gave us pretty much permission to go around through the entire silo and figure out what we were going to do miniature-wise, shot-wise, and illustration-wise. The silo is enormous, big, giant thrust cones down on the bottom where the thrust would go. It kind of has a tag off where we did all the control room is actually a part of the silo. And you never really have a continuous shot where you can see that all these sets are practically built into the silo itself. But where you have the destroyed countdown center and all that is actually a part of that silo.
9, 8.
There were 54 of those silos throughout the United States. And for 30 years, there was a 4-man crew, 24 hours a day. That meant there were 3 complete shifts every day, 4 people, 30 years. One of those people was responsible, and they drew lots. Maybe it was just taking turns, but to me it was quite phenomenal to hear that there was one of those 4-man crew selected every day. And there was a butterfly valve at the bottom of the jet engine, the Titan's engines, which could get stuck. Should it get stuck, you could not launch the missile. The missile would explode. So one of those people was elected to climb down ladders, unlock whatever was necessary to unlock on that butterfly valve, and then perhaps get back to safety, which was at least 80, 90 feet up a ladder. No mechanical device to haul that person up. You knew if you were that person and you had to fire that missile and that butterfly valve had to be opened, you were gone. You were toast. Because when that missile fired, you had when you opened the butterfly valve, you had maybe 12 seconds to travel 80 or 90 feet up a ladder. Virtually impossible for anybody. So one person on every shift knew that they might not survive the day. And that's just impossible to believe that we had that kind of dedication. But we were in the middle of the Cold War, and those 54 missiles were our defense against what we thought was, a world enemy. Fast forward to us doing First Contact. It's the only missile silo, the Pima Air Museum in Arizona, that still has a missile in it. The other silos are around, but there's no missile in them. And the only reason it was allowed to stay was by the terms of the Salk agreement, where we disbanded all our nuclear weapons, and the Russians did the same. They had to send a satellite over to verify. And all those missiles had to be out of the silo, laying on their sides, the warheads separated from them so that the satellite pictures could show that we had indeed kept our promise. And we did the same thing with the Russians. The only reason this one is still in the silo is it was never fueled. It was never supplied with a nuclear warhead. So it became a museum, and by virtue of that stroke of luck, we were able to get it for First Contact. The missile silo hadn't been in operation for years, and yet we hired a local engineer that was able to get the hydraulics working on some of the gantries. In order to work on a missile, there are little platforms that exactly fit the shape of the missile, that what you might call floor. You can exit onto one of these and not fall and work on the outside of the missile. We had enough of them made operational that we were able to use them as we needed to put cameras, to put Picard and Data at one point where they go up and have a very sensual moment with the skin of this Titan rocket. It's a very believable scene because it was indeed a real place with a real Titan missile, and the actors were inspired by it, I'm sure. They didn't have to act so much as they had to sense the feeling of the power of that. After all, that missile was made to go halfway around the world with a huge warhead. Luckily, we never had to do it.
Captain, I believe I can handle this.
There was a stunt in First Contact that I had to do where Patrick and I, early in the movie, were at this missile silo, and we're standing out on a grid really high in the air, and I don't like heights. I really don't like them at all. And I don't even like to be standing up. I prefer to be laying down.
You get somebody like Herman and Terry and a script problem. Okay, what's got to happen? Well, Data's got to jump down this missile silo. Oh, what do we need here? We need a descender. Okay, but the problem with missile silos is they are not Sheraton hotel rooms. You have very little space to work.
So there was a guy who invented this thing called a descender.
A descender is something that you can hitch a harness to somebody. You can pull them up 8 or 9 stories. You can trip the wire and let him fall, but what you have the ability to do is slow him down so that you don't bring him to a sudden stop and snap him in two.
And he said, well, I have to do this. I wanted my stunt guy to do it, but he said, no, I insist I'm doing this. So I said, all right. So they put him in my makeup, and he did it, and it looked great. It was incredible.
A lot of it was controlled also by camera. Some of the speed was controlled by camera. It's like, how do you launch a missile out of the silo and make it look like it's moving? You lower the camera, and it gives you that kind of, and then Peter takes over and it all happens.
At somewhere later in the film, in the shooting schedule, Jonathan came to me and said, that didn't work because you can see it's not you, it's him. It's this guy, he's different shape, his head's a different shape. It doesn't look anything like you. He said, what we want to do is hook you up to a wire and take you up to the top of the soundstage, which is really high, and drop you. And so I said, okay, well, if I have to do that, I really didn't want to do it because again, I don't like heights at all. But by then, the whole crew was looking at me. So they put me in a harness and put me on a wire and took me to the top of the soundstage. And I was going like this in the wind on this wire. And there was a guy on a catwalk with a pole who straightened me out so that they could then, the camera was on the ground looking up. And on the cue, they dropped me.
He took one look down there, and I think reality hit him. But he did it. The true test of anybody who, come on, fear is a common thing for all of us. We're all scared of something. And, I think courage is kind of fear that said its prayers. You either walk the walk or you don't.
I was terrified. They took me up first to like about 5 feet and said, how does that feel? And I said, okay. And they said, no, we're going to take you up to 20 to show you how that feels. And I said, no, just let's go all the way to the top and get it over with. And so I made it all the way. And, when you have something to act, you can focus a little bit. And it went fine. And then Jonathan came up and everybody applauded and it was great. And Jonathan said, that was great, but you have to do it again because I don't know why. But he just jerked me around. And so I did it again. But that's me. When you see the film and you see this character dropping through the air, that's me.
Cochrane's ship was built from measurements taken on the site, and we were not allowed to do any damage to that warhead, or what would have been a warhead had it ever been filled with explosives. So we took very accurate measurements there, and I can't compliment the Carpenter crew enough. They built this piece in about 5 different sections, and assembled it on the site, took a crane and very gingerly lifted it down onto the top of that missile, and it fit perfectly. I mean, it was a real feat of engineering on our part.
Speed.
Marker.
Action, Jake.
ATR setting.
Active.
Main bus.
Ready?
Initiate pre-ignition sequence.
I think it was on jacks, air jacks, which are very temperamental.
15 seconds. Begin ignition sequence.
And of course, they didn't work. So we're all set and everything's going, and we try to figure out how to do it. So this very, whatever century it is, I don't know, in the future, there are actually 4 Teamsters or stagehands down there with 2x4s moving this piece of set. That was fun. And it was good dialogue, you know. It was, the surprise part of it, the wonder of it, trying to imagine what that's like. I've always wondered how actors do it when they have to do dinosaurs on blue screen and have to go, sweet Jesus! I mean, I just think, how do I pitch that? I mean, I'm looking at a blank wall, and I'm looking at something that is completely out of my ken. What would I do? So that's fun, to always try to find out where to place your performance so it has some reality, which I think we did.
That should be enough. Throttle back. Take us out of warp.
The Phoenix cockpit was a lot of fun because it's closer to present-day aerospace technology. You wanted to have a little bit more of the real space shuttle and the Apollo spacecraft in it. So that part of it was a lot of fun. Also the fact that it was built on an actual Air Force Titan booster. The Phoenix cockpit was later reused as the inspection pod for Enterprise, and we've used it for a variety of other alien ships as well. I remember we used it for alien bathysphere that went into a sun. We used it for a number of things.
That's pretty exciting stuff to be able to be a part of, be able to have worked on and say, hey, I remember how lucky we were to have found that set and that it worked so well.